The day I wasn't supposed to know. The voicemail lasted 47 seconds. Daniel listened to it 3 times, standing in his kitchen in his bathrobe, coffee going cold on the counter, the morning sunlight cutting through the window in that cheerful, oblivious way sunlight has when it doesn't know it's witnessing the quiet shattering of a person. Hey Dad, so there's something I need to tell you. Mia and James got married last Saturday. It was small, really small, just a few people. I know you're probably upset, but please don't call until you've had time to process. Love you. His daughter Nicole had sent the voicemail at 6:14 in the morning, early enough that she knew he wouldn't pick up, late enough that she'd clearly been awake for hours working up the nerve. The wedding had happened 6 days ago. His granddaughter Mia, 26 years old, the little girl who used to fall asleep on his chest watching Saturday morning cartoons, had gotten married in a ceremony that Daniel didn't just miss, he hadn't been invited to. He set the phone down on the counter. He picked it up again. He set it down again. Then he sat at the kitchen table and did something he hadn't done since his wife, Carol, passed away 4 years ago. He put his face in his hands and stayed very, very still. Daniel Whitmore was 63 years old, recently retired from 31 years as a high school history teacher, and by most measures, a reasonable man. He was the kind of father who had driven through snowstorms to pick Nicole up from college parties without a single lecture on the way home. The kind of grandfather who remembered every child's favorite color, pizza topping, and the exact episode of whatever cartoon they were obsessed with. He coached Little League for 12 years. He showed up. That was the thing about Daniel, he always showed up. Which was precisely why the absence of an invitation hit him like a physical blow. Tried to reconstruct the last year in his mind. Had there been signs? He and Mia texted regularly, maybe every week or two. She called on birthdays. Christmas had been warm if a little rushed. She and James had to leave early for his family's celebration, and Daniel had smiled and waved them off from the porch. James seemed decent enough. Quiet, a little guarded, the kind of young man who shook hands too firmly because he was nervous, not aggressive. Daniel had liked him fine. Had he said something wrong, done something, forgotten something? He mentally scrolled through every interaction with Mia over the past 18 months like a man reviewing security footage after a break-in, searching desperately for the moment everything went sideways. Easter brunch, that seemed fine. Her promotion at work, he'd sent flowers. Her birthday, he'd driven 2 hours to take her and James to dinner at that Italian place she loved, and she'd hugged him at the end of the night, a real hug, not a performative one. Nothing, he could find nothing. Which almost made it worse. He didn't call Nicole that day, or the next. Instead, he did what Daniel always did when he didn't know what to do with himself. He went into the garage and started working. There was a bookshelf he'd been meaning to build for the church library. He sanded and measured and cut and fitted joints until his arms ached, and the sawdust coated his forearms, and there was nothing left in his head except wood grain and right angles. His neighbor, Terry, appeared in the driveway around noon with 2 sandwiches and the expression of a man who'd been briefed. Nicole called my wife, Terry said simply, handing Daniel a sandwich. Figured you might not be eating. I'm fine, Daniel said. You've been in this garage since 6 in the morning. The church needs a bookshelf. Terry sat down on an overturned crate and unwrapped his sandwich with the patience of someone who had nowhere to be. They ate in silence for a while, which was one of the great things about a 30-year friendship. The silence was never uncomfortable. You know what's funny, Daniel said finally. I keep thinking about what I did wrong, like it must have been something I did. Maybe it wasn't about you. She's my granddaughter. I know. I taught her how to ride a bike. I sat in the emergency room for 6 hours when she broke her wrist. He stopped. I was at every school play, every graduation, he put the sandwich down. Terry, I don't miss things, that's not who I am. I know who you are, Terry said quietly. The question is whether Mia forgot or whether someone made a choice. Daniel looked at him. Terry shrugged, not unkindly. You've got a daughter in the middle of this, Daniel, and daughters sometimes make choices that protect their kids, even when those choices aren't fair to everyone else. He called Nicole on the 3rd day. She picked up on the 2nd ring, which meant she'd been waiting. Her voice was carefully neutral in the way that people's voices get when they've rehearsed a conversation 20 times and are still not ready for it. Dad. Hey, sweetheart. He'd decided, driving to nowhere in particular with the phone on speaker, that he was going to stay calm. He was a history teacher. He knew that the worst conversations in history happened when everyone was emotional and no one was listening. I'd like to understand what happened. She exhaled. I know, I'm sorry I sent a voicemail. That was cowardly. It was, he kept his voice even. But I'm not calling to argue about the voicemail. I want to understand why I wasn't at my granddaughter's wedding. There was a long pause. Dad, Mia asked me not to say anything. Mia is going to have to be part of this conversation eventually, but right now I'm talking to you. Another pause. He could hear Nicole breathing, choosing words, discarding them, choosing others. He recognized the pattern. She'd done it as a teenager, working up to admissions that were difficult. He'd always waited her out. He waited now. James's family, she said finally. They're traditional. His parents were very involved in the planning. They had strong opinions about the guest list and she stopped. And they wanted it small, immediate family only. His parents, his brother, his grandmother. Daniel absorbed this. His family was there. Yes, but not hers. I was there, Dad, Nicole. Her grandfather wasn't. Silent. Nicole, he pulled into the parking lot of a grocery store and turned off the engine. Are you telling me that Mia didn't invite me because her husband's family didn't want a large wedding? Help me understand that. Because that's my granddaughter choosing her husband's family's preferences over her own grandfather being at her wedding. It's complicated, Dad. I've been a teacher for 30 years. I can handle complicated. She was scared, Nicole said, and her voice broke on the last word in a way that told him this was the truth. Or close to it. She was scared of James's mother. She's a strong personality. She was already unhappy about the venue and the dress and 100 other things, and Mia she wanted one day that wasn't a battle, Dad. She just wanted one day that went smoothly. And she was afraid that if you came, there'd be tension and... Tension, he repeated the words slowly. What tension? When have I ever caused tension at a family event? The silence that followed was a different kind of silence. Heavier. Dad, Nicole said carefully. Do you remember James's dad, Robert? You met him at Mia's birthday dinner last year. Of course, seemed like a stiff fellow, very opinionated about politics. You argued with him for 45 minutes about immigration policy. We had a spirited discussion. Dad, her voice was gentle but firm. You made him cry. Daniel opened his mouth, closed it. He didn't cry. He excused himself to the bathroom and Mia followed him and he was, look, the point is Mia loves you. She loves you so much. But she also knew that you and Robert in the same room at her wedding with James's mother already wound up she made a choice. A terrible choice, maybe. But she made it because she was afraid and she was trying to hold everything together. Daniel sat in that parking lot for a long time after the call ended. He thought about the birthday dinner. He'd been passionate, certainly. Robert had said things that were factually incorrect, and Daniel had a professional allergy to factual incorrectness. He hadn't thought. Had he made the man cry? He drove to Mia's apartment 2 days later. He didn't call ahead. He brought the only thing he knew how to bring when he didn't have words: food. Specifically, the chicken piccata he'd made for her since she was 8 years old, and declared it her favorite meal on earth. She opened the door and saw the container in his hands, and burst into tears immediately. Grandpa, she said, which came out broken and strange. Hi, kiddo, he said. She stepped back to let him in. James was there, sitting stiffly at the kitchen table, a young man bracing for impact. Daniel set the food down, shook James's hand, and sat across from them both. I'm not here to yell, Daniel said. I want to be clear about that up front. I was hurt. I'm still hurt, but I'm not here to punish anyone. Mia wiped her eyes with her sleeve. She was wearing a grey sweater, her hair in a messy knot, looking very much like the 8-year-old who declared chicken piccata the world's greatest food, just taller and more devastated. I'm so sorry, Grandpa, I didn't know how to. Your mom explained some of it, he said. I understand the situation better than I did. I still don't agree with the choice, but I understand it. He looked at James. I owe you an apology. James blinked. Sir. Your father, last year at the dinner. Daniel folded his hands on the table. I was rude. I turned a birthday celebration into a debate, and I didn't consider how that made anyone else feel. I'm sorry. James stared at him for a moment, visibly recalibrating everything he'd prepared himself to say. I thank you. He can be difficult, but still. I can be difficult too, apparently. Daniel allowed himself a small, tired smile. I am a history teacher. We're constitutionally incapable of letting inaccuracies pass without comment. It's an occupational hazard, but I should have read the room better. He looked at Mia. That said, the solution to me being occasionally too passionate at dinner tables is not to exclude me from your wedding. Do you understand that? Mia nodded, tears running freely. If there had been a conversation, if you had said, "Grandpa, I'm worried about things getting tense. Can you promise me you'll let things go that day?" I would have promised. And I would have kept that promise, because you are my granddaughter and I would have walked through fire to watch you get married. All you had to do was ask. She crossed the kitchen and hugged him then hard, the way she used to as a little girl, and he held on because he was 63 and recently retired, and his wife was gone, and this child, this woman, was one of the people who made his life feel like it still had direction. "I'm sorry," she said into his shoulder. "I know," he said, "I know you are." James quietly got up to plate the chicken piccata, which was, Daniel thought, a very good sign about the boy. They ate together for 2 hours. James turned out to be far more interesting than Daniel had given him credit for. He was an engineer who'd grown up obsessed with the same history of naval warfare that Daniel had taught for years, and they fell into an easy conversation about the Battle of Midway that went on longer than anyone expected. Mia sat between them looking stunned and relieved in equal measure. They looked at pictures from the wedding on Mia's phone. It had been small in a courthouse garden, with wildflowers and an officiant who'd apparently told a joke that made everyone laugh. Mia was beautiful in a simple cream dress. James looked at her in one of the photos with the particular expression of a person who cannot believe their luck. Daniel felt the ache of not being there. He suspected he always would. But he also recognized the face of a young couple who'd been terrified and overwhelmed, and had made an imperfect decision in an attempt to survive a moment that felt too big to manage. He'd taught enough young people to know that fear made otherwise loving individuals do things they'd spend years regretting. "We want to have a celebration," Mia said before he left. "A real one, all the people who matter. Your rules, Grandpa, you can debate anyone you want." He laughed, the first real laugh in a week. "I'll behave," he said, "mostly." He called Nicole on the way home. "How'd it go?" she asked, and he could hear her bracing again, that held breath quality in her voice. "We're okay," he said, "we'll be okay." "Dad, I'm sorry I didn't." "You protected your daughter," he said. "That's what you're supposed to do. I might have made a different choice, but I understand the one you made." She exhaled. "I should have pushed harder, for you." "Maybe, but here we are." He drove through the quiet streets of his neighborhood, the familiar turns and houses and the way the elm trees arched over one particular block and turned the afternoon light green and cathedral-like. "Tell you what, sweetheart, next family dinner, you seat me as far away from Robert as the room allows." Nicole laughed, watery and relieved. "Done," she said, "done and done." The bookshelf for the church library was finished by the following Thursday. Daniel loaded it into his truck and drove it over, helped the volunteers assemble it against the far wall of the reading room, and stood back to look at it for a moment. The clean lines, the solid joints, the way it could hold something. He thought about Mia in her cream dress in the courthouse garden. He thought about a table with chicken piccata and a young engineer who loved naval history. He thought about how families are, at their core, just a series of imperfect people doing imperfect things, and somehow stubbornly finding their way back to each other. He wasn't in the photographs, but he was still her grandfather. And next time, the real celebration, the one with the people who mattered, he would be in every single one.